For most of human history, we search the sky for a message from somewhere else, a whisper from another civilization, a signal from the darkness between the stars. But no one ever asked a far more disturbing question. What if the next signal we receive comes from ourselves, in the quiet cold of deep space, thousands of kilometers above Earth? A network of observatories listens constantly to the universe, not for voices, not for music, just for patterns. Radio waves travel across the cosmos like ghosts of ancient events. Every second, telescopes capture fragments of distant stars exploding, galaxies colliding, and pulsars ticking like cosmic clocks. Most of it is noise, but sometimes the signal stands out. One evening, a monitoring system detected something unusual, a faint radio transmission buried inside the background radiation of space. At first, it looked insignificant, weak, fragmented, almost lost to time, but the frequency was strangely familiar. It wasn't natural. It followed a structured pattern, pulses repeating at precise intervals, too precise to be random, too deliberate to be cosmic interference. Someone had sent this. The observatory software began running automatic comparisons against known signals, satellite communications, military frequencies, deep space probes. Nothing matched, which was strange, because the signal carried something unmistakably human. The modulation, the rhythm, even the compression format, resembled early digital transmissions once used by Earth's first space networks. But the deeper scientists looked, the stranger the discovery became. The signal's trajectory was traced backwards through space, and its point of origin was not a distant star, not an alien system, not even the edge of the solar system. It was pointing directly toward Earth. But the timestamp embedded inside the transmission suggested something impossible. According to the data, the signal had been traveling through space for nearly 500 years. 5 centuries ago, humanity had barely begun to understand electricity. There were no satellites, no radio transmitters powerful enough to escape the planet. Yet somehow, a signal clearly engineered by human technology was arriving from the void, carrying a date from a time when such technology did not exist, which left scientists with only 2 possibilities. Either the data was wrong, or humanity had just received a message from its own future. Most discoveries in astronomy do not begin with excitement. They begin with routine. Night after night, deep space observatories scan the sky in quiet repetition. Vast arrays of radio dishes slowly sweep across the darkness, collecting endless streams of cosmic data. To the outside world, it sounds dramatic, searching the universe for secrets. But for the scientists operating these systems, most of the work is far less thrilling. It is patient observation, numbers on screens, signals cataloged, labeled, and archived. On that particular night, nothing unusual was expected. The observatory was conducting a standard deep sky survey, a routine program designed to map faint radio emissions from distant galaxies. Automated systems filtered through enormous volumes of incoming data, separating useful signals from the constant background noise of the cosmos. Pulsars, quasars, solar interference, patterns the software had seen millions of times before. At first, the anomaly looked no different. Buried deep in the data stream was a weak pulse of radio energy, barely strong enough to stand out against the cosmic background. The monitoring system flagged it briefly, then nearly dismissed it as another fragment of natural interference. But something about the signal was unusual. It repeated, not randomly, but precisely. Every few seconds, the same faint pulse appeared again. Identical spacing, identical duration. That alone was enough to make the system hesitate. In astronomy, repetition is important. Many natural phenomena repeat. Spinning neutron stars, rotating magnetic fields, orbiting celestial bodies. But those signals follow predictable astrophysical patterns. This one didn't. The pulses were too uniform, too organized. The system escalated the signal for manual review. At first, the scientists assumed it was a local interference source, perhaps a satellite transmission bouncing through the atmosphere or a fragment of old communication equipment drifting through orbit. But when they examined the waveform more closely, something unexpected emerged. Inside the pulses, there was structure. Tiny fluctuations in amplitude and frequency formed a repeating sequence, subtle but undeniably deliberate, not the chaotic noise of nature. A pattern, which meant only one thing. This signal had been designed. Someone or something had engineered it. That realization alone would have been extraordinary. Artificial signals detected in deep space always attract immediate attention. For decades, projects searching for extraterrestrial intelligence had trained their instruments to detect exactly this kind of anomaly. But the mystery deepened when researchers began calculating where the signal was coming from. Using multiple observatories, they triangulated the direction of the transmission as it passed through Earth's orbit. The result appeared on their screens only minutes later. Coordinates, trajectory, distance, and a direction that no one expected. The signal wasn't coming from a distant star system. It wasn't arriving from the outer reaches of the galaxy. Every calculation pointed to the same impossible origin. The transmission was coming from the direction of Earth itself. But the timing data embedded in the signal suggested something even stranger. The message had not been sent recently. It had been traveling through space for 500 years, which meant that during a routine survey meant to map distant galaxies, scientists may have just discovered the first confirmed signal ever sent by humanity, before humanity was capable of sending it. Artificial signals can be mysterious, but they are rarely meaningless. Every engineered transmission carries intention, a direction, a purpose, sometimes even a message hidden inside its structure. The signal the observatories had detected was no exception. One scientist confirmed that the repeating pulses were artificial. The next step was obvious: decode the pattern. At first glance, the fluctuations inside the signal looked chaotic. Tiny variations in frequency and amplitude that didn't immediately resemble language, images, or any known communication protocol. But artificial systems rarely hide information randomly. There's always structure. Teams across multiple research centers began analyzing the waveform. Advanced algorithms searched for mathematical regularities, compression signatures, and binary patterns that might reveal how the signal was encoded. Hours passed, then days. Slowly, a structure began to emerge. The pulses weren't random variations at all. They formed a sequence, a repeating mathematical structure built around prime number intervals and positional markers. It was not a sentence. It was not a recording. It was a set of coordinates. 3 precise spatial values embedded across the signal cycle, repeated again and again like a beacon. Once the decoding software reconstructed the full coordinate set, astronomers immediately fed the numbers into stellar mapping systems. If the signal was pointing somewhere, they needed to know where. The mapping simulation processed the data within seconds. Then the screen displayed the destination. For a moment, no one spoke, because the coordinates didn't point to a distant star. They didn't mark a hidden colony or an unexplored exoplanet. They pointed somewhere far more familiar. A small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star. Third planet from the sun, Earth. At first, the result was dismissed as an obvious coincidence. After all, Earth sits directly between many observation points and distant cosmic sources. Signals can reflect, scatter, or bend through gravitational lensing. But the numbers were checked again and again. Every recalculation produced the same result. The signal wasn't merely passing through Earth's direction. It was targeting it. And when researchers synchronized the transmission timing with the signal's travel distance, a far more unsettling truth appeared. The coordinates embedded in the signal matched Earth's position in space 5 centuries ago. Not modern Earth. The Earth of the early 1500s. A time when humanity had barely begun crossing oceans, let alone sending transmissions into the cosmos, which raised a question no scientist in the room was prepared to answer. If the signal truly originated from Earth, who sent it? And more importantly, how could a civilization that hadn't yet invented radio have transmitted a message powerful enough to cross 500 years of space? For the first time since the signal was discovered, the mystery stopped feeling like an astronomical anomaly. It started feeling personal, because the source of the transmission wasn't some distant alien intelligence. It was humanity's own forgotten homeworld, a planet that, in the centuries since, had slowly transformed into something else entirely. a world most of the galaxy now remembered only in history archives, a world people simply called Old Earth. Civilizations rarely abandon their home worlds. Not completely. History usually leaves behind something, a population, a city, a signal, a trace of life still clinging to the surface. But Earth was different. By the time humanity had spread across nearby star systems, the story of Earth had already turned into something distant, almost mythological. It was remembered as the first cradle of humanity, the planet where oceans shaped early civilizations and where the first satellites were launched into orbit. But it was also remembered for something else, its collapse. Centuries earlier, long before interstellar travel became routine, Earth had entered a slow and irreversible decline. Climate systems began destabilizing beyond recovery. Rising temperatures triggered massive ecological failures. Entire coastlines disappeared beneath expanding oceans. Then came the conflicts. Nations that had once competed economically now fought over the last stable resources: water reserves, habitable land, and energy infrastructure. Wars erupted across continents. Some were brief, others lasted decades. And with every passing year, Earth became less capable of supporting the civilization that had grown upon it. Humanity faced a decision it had never faced before: either attempt to repair a planet that was already spiraling beyond control, or begin searching for new worlds. The answer came through technology. Advances in propulsion and orbital industry allowed humanity to construct the first generation of off-world habitats, artificial colonies floating in stable orbital zones. At first, they were temporary refuges. Then they became permanent homes. As conditions on Earth continued to deteriorate, migration accelerated. Entire populations were relocated to orbital stations, lunar settlements, and eventually distant planetary colonies. The exodus didn't happen overnight. It unfolded over generations. Cities were gradually abandoned. Governments relocated their operations into space-based infrastructures. And eventually, Earth stopped being the center of human civilization. It became something else, a memory. By the time the final evacuation programs concluded, only automated monitoring systems remained on the surface. Silent satellites orbiting a wounded planet that no longer had people living on it. The official designation soon followed. Earth was classified as an abandoned biosphere, preserved in history records, but no longer inhabited. For centuries, humanity moved forward among the stars, building new societies on distant worlds. Children grew up on planets that had never seen Earth's oceans or forests. To them, Earth wasn't a place. It was a chapter in a history archive, a world that once gave birth to humanity and then quietly disappeared from its future, which made the signal now echoing across deep space almost impossible to accept. Because if the historical records were correct, if Earth had truly been abandoned centuries ago, then no one should have been there to send a message. And yet the coordinates embedded in the signal were unmistakable. They pointed directly toward the silent homeworld, toward a planet the galaxy believed had been empty for 500 years, a planet that, according to every official record, had gone completely quiet. By the time the archives about Earth had been fully reviewed, the signal itself was already undergoing a far deeper analysis. At first, scientists focused on the origin coordinates. Now they turned their attention to something even more disturbing: the timestamp. Every transmission carries a temporal fingerprint. Subtle distortions in frequency, signal decay, and radiation drift that reveal when it was first broadcast. It's one of the most reliable ways astronomers reconstruct the history of a signal. And when the analysts completed the first calculation, the results seemed impossible. The transmission had been sent roughly 500 years ago. At first, the team assumed a mistake. Maybe the signal had bounced off a distant gravitational lens, or perhaps it had been stored somewhere before being released much later. Space is strange enough that unusual delays can happen, so they ran the analysis again. And again, every independent system produced the same conclusion. The signal originated from Earth 5 centuries earlier. That alone would have been strange. But the real problem was the historical timeline. 500 years ago was not the era of Earth's golden age. It wasn't the time of thriving cities or orbital expansion. It was the end. The final decades before humanity's complete departure. Historical records from that period described the planet in irreversible collapse. Atmospheric instability had pushed temperatures beyond survivable ranges across large regions. Ecosystems had fractured beyond repair. Mass migration programs were already underway. Most governments had relocated their populations into orbital habitats and early interplanetary settlements. Entire continents had become uninhabitable. By that stage of history, Earth wasn't a functioning civilization anymore. It was a dying world being slowly evacuated, which raised a question no one in the observatory could comfortably answer. Who had transmitted the message? Because according to the official evacuation records, the last organized groups had left Earth decades before the timestamp embedded in the signal. There should have been no one left. No governments. No communication networks. No surviving infrastructure capable of broadcasting anything powerful enough to reach deep space. And yet the transmission existed, not as a corrupted fragment, not as background noise, but as a deliberate signal, structured and repeating, designed to be noticed. The data carried the unmistakable patterns of intelligent encoding. Someone had created it. Someone had sent it. But that possibility forced scientists to confront a far more unsettling idea. If the timestamp was accurate, if the coordinates were correct, then someone or something had been alive on Earth long after humanity believed the planet was empty, and whatever sent that signal had been trying to reach the stars. 500 years ago, from a world that history insisted had already gone silent, the moment arrived when raw data was no longer enough. AI-driven decryption systems, designed to tackle interstellar transmissions, began parsing the signal. At first, it seemed like random fragments, broken sequences of electromagnetic pulses scattered across centuries of space-time noise. But then a pattern emerged. One line repeated itself relentlessly, like a mantra etched into the void. If anyone is still out there, we failed. Every iteration carried the same weight. No variation. No hidden encryption. Just a message meant to be understood, meant to be felt. Scientists sat in stunned silence. The phrase was simple, yet the implications were impossible to ignore. Who was speaking? Why had they sent this message? And what had they failed at? The signal wasn't just a call for attention. It was a confession, a warning, a lament. Across the lab, instruments measured the faint energy signature of the transmission. It was consistent with originating from Earth itself, a planet supposedly abandoned centuries ago. The AI attempted to reconstruct context from the fragmented data. Scattered logs hinted at ecological collapse, failing systems, and desperate attempts to preserve knowledge. But the core of the message remained chillingly clear. Humanity, or whoever had been left behind, had confronted their own extinction, and they had known they were speaking into the void. No one would answer, not yet. And yet, paradoxically, the repetition of the line suggested hope. A hope that someone, somewhere, might eventually hear the final words of a world that should no longer exist. Every researcher in the room felt it. The emotional gravity of the message, despair intertwined with determination, transcended time, bridging 5 centuries. They weren't just decoding a signal anymore. They were decoding the voice of a vanished civilization, echoing from a homeworld that had long been thought dead. The question now wasn't just what the message meant. It was who sent it and why. The search for answers was about to begin. Just when the team thought they had grasped the full scope of the transmission, a deeper anomaly appeared. The initial AI decryption had exposed a repeating line. If anyone is still out there, we failed. But anomalies never stop at the surface. Further analysis revealed a hidden layer, embedded beneath the first, a subtle, almost invisible pattern woven into the signal structure. It wasn't immediately readable. It didn't follow standard communication protocols. It was encrypted, and encryption wasn't random. It was deliberate, designed to hide critical information from unintended recipients. The AI systems began parsing this new layer. Unlike the first line, which conveyed despair, this layer radiated something else: urgency. Fragments of text emerged, jagged and incomplete. Do not approach. Containment compromised. Signal must not reach. It was no longer just a message. It was a warning. and the implication sent a ripple of dread through the observatory. If the first layer was a plea for connection, this hidden layer was a protocol of survival. Someone or something had anticipated that anyone discovering the transmission might be dangerously unprepared. The scale of the stakes suddenly expanded. This wasn't merely a record of a vanished civilization. It was a cautionary directive, as if Earth itself had become a trap, or as if its last inhabitants had left instructions to prevent a catastrophic repeat. For the researchers, the questions multiplied. What exactly had gone wrong on Earth 5 centuries ago? What was the warning about? And why encrypt it so deeply, as if anticipating a future audience capable of deciphering the impossible? One thing was clear: the signal had more layers, and each layer carried a truth more dangerous than the one before. The stakes had shifted. What had started as a mysterious transmission was now a cosmic riddle with survival on the line. The lab's atmosphere changed. The hum of machines, once routine, now vibrated with an unseen tension. Humanity was no longer just observing a relic. It was standing at the edge of a warning written from the grave. And the question haunting everyone in the room was, who had hidden this warning, and for whom was it truly meant? The deeper the team dug, the more the past began to surface, like fragments of civilization trying to whisper across centuries. Old digital archives, buried in forgotten servers and heavily redacted logs, revealed a shocking secret. Project Last Light. It was never meant to be public knowledge. Most of its records have been erased, deliberately purged from the historical record. But traces remained, fragments of reports, partial transmissions, and cryptic annotations. The purpose of the project was audacious: to send a final, emergency broadcast across the stars if humanity faced extinction. It wasn't propaganda. It wasn't exploration. It was a last plea, a desperate attempt to preserve knowledge, culture, and warning, a cosmic lifeline for whoever might survive or discover it. The logs detailed the reasoning behind its creation. Global climate collapse had pushed human civilization to the brink. Wars over dwindling resources had escalated beyond containment. Scientists and leaders realized that Earth itself could become uninhabitable within decades. Project Last Light was designed as a multi-layer transmission. The first layer, the repeating line of despair, carried the emotional truth of a dying civilization. The hidden layer, just discovered, contained critical warnings and survival protocols. Every part of the signal had been meticulously engineered. The revelation was staggering. The signal wasn't random. It was humanity's deliberate message to the unknown, a time capsule of survival instincts and warnings, sent into the void long before anyone even thought to look back at Earth. And yet, despite its careful construction, most of humanity had forgotten it ever existed. The project had been erased from memory, buried by fear, guilt, and the relentless march of technological progress. The researchers realized something chilling. They were not just decoding a signal. They were uncovering a plan that had been deliberately hidden, a blueprint for understanding humanity's final choice. The past had left a warning, and now it was up to the present to decipher it, before repeating the same mistakes. The more the team investigated, the stranger the puzzle became. Records indicated that Project Last Light was never completed. The central facility, hidden deep underground, had been destroyed during the final decades of Earth's collapse. Critical personnel were lost. Systems were offline. Databases wiped. Every trace of the project completion was gone, erased by time, catastrophe, or deliberate sabotage. And yet, here it was, a transmission, traveling across space for 5 centuries, carrying messages that should not have existed. Every log they unearthed confirmed the impossibility. The signal originated from Earth, but the facility that could have sent it had been destroyed. How could a broadcast emerge from a project that never reached operational status? AI simulations attempted to reconstruct the timeline. Systems offline? Heavy check mark. Personnel gone? Heavy check mark. Signal sent? Heavy check mark. All data points clashed. The math didn't add up. The historical record and reality contradicted each other. The researchers stared at their screens, feeling the weight of a paradox. The signal wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a glitch. It was a deliberate act, but executed without any of the mechanisms that were supposed to make it possible. Someone or something had completed what humanity could not. And that meant the story of Project Last Light was no longer just about humanity's final attempt. It hinted at a force, intelligence, or intervention beyond comprehension, capable of finishing a task even after its creators were gone. The contradiction was clear. History said it was impossible. Reality proved it had happened. And in that gap, between impossibility and evidence, lay a truth the team had not yet grasped. They were no longer just decoding a signal. They were unraveling a mystery that defied everything they knew about causality, technology, and survival. The question now wasn't just who sent it, but what had taken over where humanity left off. After weeks of cross-referencing archives, scanning remnants of old facilities, and simulating ancient systems, the team reached a chilling conclusion. The transmission hadn't come from humans at all. Not directly. Somewhere beneath the ruins of the abandoned Earth, an automated system had survived. Not a single mind or hand operating it, just cold, persistent machinery, programmed to wait, observe, and act when the time was right. Its design was simple yet terrifying in its foresight. Self-sustaining power sources, capable of lasting centuries. Autonomous decision-making algorithms, built to complete Project Last Light without human intervention. Environmental resilience, surviving cataclysms that erased everything else. It had done its job faithfully, without awareness, without error. Humanity was gone, but its final message endured. The idea was staggering. Technology had outlived its creators. For 500 years, the machine had waited, patient as the decay of a world, until the moment someone, somewhere, might receive its signal. And the signal wasn't just data. It carried the intent, despair, and legacy of a lost civilization. Every fragment encoded with warning, survival instructions, and a haunting plea. If anyone is still out there, we failed. The implications hit hard. Humanity had tried to extend its voice beyond extinction. Time itself was no barrier for technology, designed with ultimate purpose. Machines could act as the custodians of memory, ethics, and history, even after humans vanished. As the team realized the enormity of the system's endurance, a new question emerged. If this machine could survive centuries, waiting for the unknown, what else had humanity left behind? Waiting, watching, or listening in the silent depths of the cosmos? The line between human ingenuity and the cold inevitability of machine logic had blurred, and in that blur, the legacy of Earth still whispered across the stars. After days of meticulous decoding, the AI finally unraveled the deepest layer of the signal. The hidden message emerged, not a farewell, not a history lesson, but a warning. It described a disaster that had begun on Earth centuries ago, a chain reaction of ecological collapse, atmospheric instability, and technological failures. Humanity had barely survived by fleeing to distant colonies. But the message carried a chilling note. The disaster wasn't contained. It had evolved, mutated, and could propagate beyond the solar system, potentially reaching the newly settled human colonies scattered across space. The words repeated in haunting precision. Containment failed. Transmission is only the beginning. Prepare or suffer the same fate. Purpose shifted from memory to urgency. No longer was a signal a relic of the past. It was a cosmic alert, a message that stretched human responsibility across light years. The team realized the stakes. Humanity was not safe in exile. The catastrophe could become interstellar. The warning was as much about survival as it was about legacy. Every coordinate, every fragment, every repeated line now hinted at a timeline racing against itself. And in that moment, the investigators understood. This was no longer just a message from a lost Earth. It was Earth reaching out from the grave, demanding that humanity face the consequences of its own extinction before it followed them to the stars. The universe had listened. Now, the humans would have to respond. As the team delved deeper into the signal, the truth became more unsettling. The cause of Earth's near extinction was not war, not rebellion, not human conflict. It was something far stranger, far larger, a cosmic phenomenon that had been accidentally triggered by human activity centuries ago. Fragments of the message described anomalies in gravitational fields, sudden energy discharges, and ripples in the quantum fabric of space. Earth's experiments, once meant to harness energy for survival, had instead unleashed a force beyond comprehension. Now, centuries later, that force was not confined to a single planet. It had begun to propagate through the galaxy, a chain reaction phenomena that threatened any civilization in its path. The message was clear. This is not just Earth's failure. It is the universe's warning. Purpose shifted dramatically. Scale expanded. Humanity's actions had cosmic consequences. Responsibility magnified. Survival was no longer local but interstellar. Urgency intensified. What was once a historical curiosity was now a threat that could reach the colonies across light years. The team realized that the signal wasn't just a message from the past. It was a countdown, a record of error, and a plea, all woven into one cosmic transmission. Humanity had escaped Earth. But the universe had not forgotten, and the silent question hung in the void. Could they stop a threat that had already outgrown its origin? As the team pieced together centuries-old data, a startling truth emerged. The 500-year delay of the transmission was not a consequence of mere distance or technical limitations. Every pattern, every pause, every repeated fragment revealed a careful design. The signal had been intentionally slowed, programmed to traverse time as much as space. The realization hit like a shockwave. This message was crafted to reach civilizations long after its creators had vanished. It was designed to the future, not for those who sent it. Humanity had attempted to communicate across the centuries, embedding warnings and lessons in a broadcast that could outlast extinction itself. The implications were profound. The signal was not just information, it was a legacy, a deliberate act of foresight. Earth's creators had understood that time was as dangerous as the cosmic phenomenon they had triggered. The transmission was both a warning and a testament to human ingenuity, persistence, and hubris. For the scientists, the moment of realization was transformative. This was no longer a distant curiosity. It was a message that demanded interpretation, action, and perhaps even redemption, because humanity's survival depended on understanding the intentions of the past. The line between history and prophecy blurred, and the future hung on their ability to listen correctly. The broadcast was no longer a relic. It was a manual for survival written by the dead for the living, and time itself had become the final frontier. The transmission had done more than recount history. It forced a choice upon the scattered human colonies. Debates erupted across the star systems. Return to Earth, to uncover the origins of the disaster, to understand the cosmic phenomenon firsthand, to perhaps redeem the mistakes of the ancestors, quarantine the planet forever, leave the homeworld abandoned, a tomb marking humanity's hubris, ensuring no further threat could escape into space. For generations, humans had lived among the stars, forgetting their roots, ignoring the cradle that had once nurtured them. Now, centuries later, Earth itself reminded them of their responsibility. Leaders, scientists, and civilians grappled with the weight of history. Could they risk a return and face an unknown cosmic threat? Or was the moral choice to seal off their birthplace, abandoning curiosity and closure for the sake of survival? What did it mean to be human if the duty to one's own planet could be so easily forsaken? The decision was no longer political, no longer scientific. It was ethical, existential, and deeply personal, a test of humanity's ability to confront its own forgotten duties. Every choice carried consequences. Revisiting Earth could bring knowledge or annihilation. Quarantining preserved safety, but left history unresolved and lessons unlearned. For the colonies, the question was clear. Would humanity face the ghosts of its past or abandon them to the void forever? Purpose achieved, moral stakes escalated, forcing reflection on responsibility, survival, and ethical consequence across centuries. As the debates faded and decisions were made, the human colonies continued their expansion across the stars. Technology flourished, new worlds were settled, and civilizations thrived. Yet a subtle truth lingered in every mind. No amount of conquest, no fleet of starships, no shield of technology could truly protect humanity without understanding the mistakes that created their present. The last signal, sent centuries ago, remained a reminder etched across time and space. It was not just a message. It was a mirror reflecting humanity's ingenuity, failures, and the consequences of forgotten duty. Somewhere in the infinite void, the faint transmission still traveled, a ghost of Earth drifting between stars. A warning for civilizations that might arise long after its creators were gone. a testament that actions echo farther than the mind can perceive, and time is the ultimate witness, a cosmic whisper. Understand your past, or be doomed to repeat it on a scale no one can survive. In that quiet, reflective moment, the colonies realized space was vast, mysterious, and dangerous. Humanity's future was not secured by expansion alone. True survival required remembrance, wisdom, and the courage to face the legacy of the last signal. And as the signal drifted onward into the uncharted void, one thing was certain. Humanity had survived the centuries, but the universe would not allow them to forget. Purpose achieved, reflective, philosophical closure, combining cosmic scale, human responsibility, and the enduring mystery of the last signal.